Dishonored 2 begins some 14 years after the events of Dishonored 1. Emily Caldwin is Empress, Corvo Attano, her father, and the protagonist of Dishonored 1, is her right hand man, and a coup is set in place by her long lost aunt, one Delilah Caldwin. Delilah takes over the throne, removes Emily from power, and depending on your choice of protagonist, either places Emily or Corvo in stone. Whichever you choose, you will be playing as, and whichever you don't choose will be encased in stone to later be come back to. For the purposes of this review, I played as Emily. I went for high chaos, as I did with Dishonored 1, and tried to find alternate routes for getting rid of targets whenever possible. I played it in the summer of 2017 on the PC. As of this recording, it seems most of the technical issues that were around when this game came out have been removed in some fashion, or at least I didn't encounter them. As of this recording, Death of the Outsider, the first DLC for Dishonored 2, has not come out yet, but is very soon coming. The story of Dishonored 2 isn't very interesting. The arc is very much like Dishonored 1, whereas you are thrown out of your kingdom early on, go to a different area to find answers, and then come back at the very end. It's a lot like Dishonored 1 in that we end up seeing several of the old faces, but it doesn't seem as fresh as Dishonored 1. Dishonored 1's story was nothing to write home about, but at the very least, it hadn't been done before. Dishonored 2 doesn't really seem to hit that same impact. Emily is a fairly boring protagonist. Corvo may be better, but he wasn't much better in Dishonored 1. He's fairly gruff, he doesn't speak much. Emily is very much the same way, like father, like daughter, I guess. But she really doesn't bring much to the table. In fact, most of the supporting cast doesn't really either. The most interesting character is the outsider, but I'll get back into him in a little bit. All of the main characters aren't very interesting. At least Samuel had wisecracks, and the Hound Pits pub had some funny moments. They don't really have that in this. Delilah Caldwin herself isn't very sympathetic. You come into Dishonored 1, and Corvo is a tough nut to crack. He's kind of a weird dude. He's, quiet and gruff. But on the other hand, he's been thrown out of his kingdom, his wife or lover has been murdered, and his daughter has been taken. It's understandable. But when you come to the end, and you must face the choices you've made, they make sense. You were maybe overzealous in your attacks on people. You didn't have to be. You were simply trying to get answers. When the game gives you a bad ending in Dishonored 1, it feels like it makes sense, because you were cruel, you killed more than you needed to, and it was unnecessary. In Dishonored 2, it doesn't feel like that, mostly because Delilah is an unsympathetic character. The game tries to characterize her as a lost child of the throne, but it fails miserably, mostly because, as the Empress, Delilah has destroyed your kingdom, brought it to ruin, and killed many of your subjects and your friends, which also weren't characterized at all. There's a death very early on that isn't the character who dies is not characterized in any way, and you feel no remorse for her death, which is a shame. In general, everything that Delilah does makes you want to kill her. So coming to the end and taking the bad route, or the chaos route of killing her, it doesn't feel like it makes sense for the game to punish you with the chaos route, because Delilah deserves it, unlike the random bystanders in Dishonored 1. In fact, the term Dishonored doesn't really apply. Most of the people you meet don't like Delilah. In fact, even the rich don't really entirely like Delilah. It's really mostly up to Emily to save the day, and everyone kind of likes Emily. She doesn't seem dishonored. From a graphical standpoint, it looks a lot better than Dishonored 1. Dishonored 1 looked good, but Dishonored 2 looks really good. Karnaka especially is breathtaking. The whole look, the Bauhaus architecture, the Greece stylings, the white paneling and painting is very nice. Everything looks really, really good. Facially, everything is kind of lame. There's a lot missing in terms of the quality of facial animation, but that was true of Dishonored 1 as well. Most of the characters seem a little solid cardboardy. From a VA perspective, for Dishonored 2, some people dislike Robin Lord Taylor, but personally I don't. I think he was a good choice. I know the reason he was chosen was because the previous Outsider voice actor was on strike when this game was being made, and so I would have been fine with him coming back, but I think Robin Lord Taylor brings a fine job to the role. I think the sort of bored banality that he delivers all of his lines with a also shocking wit as well kind of combine into a good version of the outsider, and I'm fine with him sort of changing ideas. On the other hand, and on the same hand, I suppose, Vincent D'Onofrio as Duke Luca Abel is fantastic. He is easily the best in the entire game and overshadows everyone else. It's a shame we don't get to hear more of him because his delivery is amazing. On the other hand, the powers of Dishonored 2 are lame. For the most part, none of them feel all that good. Dishonored 1 had several that I thought were very interesting, in particular, summoning a swarm of rats and the time slow and eventually time stop, which I thought were the most fun. In Dishonored 2, powers are fairly lame. They feel like a second thought. The doppelganger is useful, but never really necessary. The attracting alongside when you upgrade your blink to allow for the grabbing and containing of people and items, it feels unnecessary. You never really needed it in the first place. Um, and the blink in general is worse than Dishonored 1's blink, which was instantaneous and had better properties than this one. The grab and long shot is worse, in my opinion. The shadow walk is a cooler idea. Walking as a shadow, a beast, was shown off in the trailers, and it works fairly well, albeit it doesn't work as well as it should because it's fairly not stealthy. Most of the powers seem like they're catered towards a stealthy playstyle, but this one, which literally turns you into a shadow, is not stealthy in the slightest. In fact, pretty much anyone will see you, which seems like an oversight. Much like in Dishonored 1, there are a few powers that seem to overshadow the others, and in this one it's Domino, the ability to link different characters to each other, and then when one experiences something, whether it be knocked unconscious or killed, the same thing happens to the other. This is horribly, horribly overpowered and makes almost any double situation a joke. In any situation where you might have to take on several enemies, any tension is immediately gone, as you know that you can just pretty much instantly domino everyone and either shoot them or knock one unconscious. As usual, the dead turning to ashes is incredibly useful if you're doing a high chaos playthrough and contains the same powers that Dishonored 1 had. I have not done a New Game Plus mode, but having access to Corvo's powers may make it fairly more interesting. I can't say for sure. Overall, the powers just lack the excitement that Dishonored 1 had. And especially the new bone charm system is fairly useless. You'll come across a bunch of bone charms that are horrible, and you'll never use them ever. Especially the corrupted bone charms, which, being a new addition to the series, bone charms that carry a benefit but also a negative, are almost entirely useless. They'll bring to the table something like less mana consumption, but you are more visible to enemies, which to anyone just seems terrible. You're never given a lack of potions for mana or for health, so it seems like usage is just never really a necessity, and making yourself more visible is god awful, especially since that in this game it seems everyone is slightly more prone to seeing you from far away. I can't be sure. The new bone charm system of fusion is useless. I didn't see any reason to do it. Once you've upgraded yourself to something like 15 or 20 bone charms, you're never going to need another one. The areas, for the most part, are fine. Like Dishonored 1, they're good, if sometimes forgettable. On the other hand, there are several that are exceptional, such as the Clockwork Manor and the Crack in the Slab slash Aramis Stilton's Manor, which I won't go into because I think they're both worth playing, but both of them deliver mechanics that are very interesting and almost feel out of character for Dishonored 2 as a whole, as they bring things to the table that feel unnaturally new. I think Dishonored 2 could have dealt with a lot more of that, which would have been a huge improvement overall. And especially the final mission is terrible. Um, Having just played it right before writing this review, it felt boring and lacked the tension of the final level in Dishonored 1, and overall left very little impact. Overall, I think Dishonored 2 is more of Dishonored 1, but lacking the original feel and aesthetic of Dishonored 1. It brings its own aesthetic to the table for sure, one that I think is excellent as well, but for that reason sacrifices something that Dishonored 1 had. Overall, if you enjoyed Dishonored 1, I would give Dishonored 2 a try because it's pretty good and they've ironed out most of the technical issues by now, but don't be expecting it to surpass the original. 7 out of 10.